In this Gold Belt video, I will show how to test a background service in JavaScript. In this particular project, I'm using the test existing functionality for background service. We'll notice in the service folder here, we are actually using a library called Node-Windows. Node-Windows is a package, an NPM package that lets us host an application built in Node for JavaScript, built in JavaScript for Node, that will host in the service manager in Windows. So this particular one is using this. That being said, a lot of these have some similarities. So the approach that I'm going to show you today for Node Windows is going to be similar to what we might do in other languages or other packages rather for JavaScript. So looking at index.js, we can see that all we're really doing is awaiting main. Main is coming in from our source/main. So let's take a look at that. Source/main is just a function, and you can see it's running something. And at the end, it's calling set timeout. And the set timeout says after 100 milliseconds, call main again. And then call main again, and then call main again. So what this is basically doing is creating an infinite loop for itself where it is constantly running in the background. So this is our main loop. It's just not using the traditional while loop structure. Instead, it's calling a timeout to make it a recursive infinite loop. So that's the idea of what we're trying to do. So all we need to do in our test is basically call into that. Now, as a part of this thing, to make it run, to know whether it is running, so Git should be running. We'll notice what we're doing is we're reading this service state.json file. So this is an interesting problem because in the JavaScript world with Node Windows, there's basically two different applications that are running, two process domains. One is the service manager and the other is the actual main functionality, in our case, the loop itself. So those two need to be able to communicate with each other. There are a couple of ways to do this. I found the easiest way is to just create a file and have both of those processes read and write the file. So the service manager part, the hosting part, is responsible to write to the file. The service itself is responsible to read the file. So that's basically the communication path. So since our test is going to emulate the service manager, we're going to write to that file when we want to start the service and when we want to stop the service. So a few different complexities here in terms of what's going on. Again, in other frameworks or other libraries for JavaScript, you may do something similar. You may do something slightly different, but that's basically those are the things for which we're looking. So again, what is the main loop? Where's that? How do we call it? Then how do we communicate when we need to start something and stop something? In that case, this is a file, a JSON file. So let's go ahead and do some installs real fast. We'll do npm I. While that's running, let me create my folder. We'll do a test folder. And our new test file. So transaction loading.test.js. Now we'll need to install a test package, whichever test package you like. I'll just use Mocha Chai. npm I, Mocha Chai -D for save dev. There we go. And let's go ahead and change our test runner to do Mocha. So find our test. Def. Nope. Describe. Here we go. Transaction loading. It should load successfully. This will need to be async, and I remember that because the main method was an async method. So I do know I'm going to need this. I also happen to know that I will likely need to set the timeout. So I'm going to go ahead and make this an anonymous method rather than a lambda, rather than an arrow function. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into our code here for the test. Effectively, what we need to do is we'll just start with a simple await main. We'll just need to import main. So import main from, make sure that looks right. That is not right. Source main.js. There we go. All right, so that's basically what we need to do here. So if I run this, not much is going to happen. Let's go ahead and just see what happens real fast. So npm test. There's a couple of problems that I'm going to run into. First off is if it runs, which it may not because the service state is set to false. Yeah, so right now it's not running. Nothing's actually happening. So it's running very quickly and immediately stopping because the service state is set to false. So we need to set it to true so it actually runs. And then we need to set it to false to make sure we stop it. The other thing that's going to happen is we're going to run into a connectivity problem with the database and our test is going to time out. Now let's let the test drive it. So the fact that this succeeds is a problem. So let's start off with just getting it to run in the first place. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create we're going to need to start the service. Now I could write that out, but I'm going to create a function for ourselves. So we'll say start service. Create function, start service. Oh, look at that. It is actually helping me out and is doing Pretty much what I want it to do. Excellent. So we're going to import the FS, which is the file system. So we're going to import that. The service state path is going to be requiring path. We're going to resolve to service state.json. So I could certainly do that. I could also just say go to the root.json. So that might be a little more that I need. Let me just clean that up a little bit. The actual path, I'm going to simplify this, is just service state.json. So it's in the current folder. The current folder happens to be the root of the folder because we're running that on the command line. So it's not where the test is, it's where we execute the npm test command. That happens to be in the root. So from there, it's the service state.json file. The state is going to be, should be running true. And again, I don't know that I need to pull this in. Let's see if we can simplify this. There we go. So we're going to stringify that. I don't really need these other arguments. That looks good. So here's our service start. We're going to start our service, which is basically import FS. I'm going to pull this up because we are going to use this for stop service as well. So let's import, I'll do this above, import FS from FS. All right, so now this is a one-liner. So could I have put this straight into my method? Yes, absolutely. But I happen to think that start service is a much more descriptive intent behind what's going on rather than write this file. All right, this is interesting. This method, in the context of starting a service, this makes a lot more sense. Let's also stop the service, which is going to be largely the same thing, except that should be running should be false. So now we're starting the service, we're running it, and we're stopping the service by the end of it. Between these, I could do some work to do assertions here, check on database resources, same thing afterwards. So stopping the service gives me the opportunity to test various things out. All right, so now that we've got that, let's run the test again. I'm expecting it to fail after just a couple of seconds because we're likely going to run into a timeout issue. Oh, actually, this is older code. I need to fix this. So hopefully by the time you get this code, you have newer code that's actually fixed. I had some bugs inside main. Let me go to these. Okay, so it's not open, it's connect. Begin transaction. This needs to be awaited. Dispose. This needs to be awaited. And this is not commit transaction. This is commit. I had quite a few errors. All right, let me try this again. Like I said, your code should already be fixed by the time you get this. That's just some things that I have on my to-do list I haven't done yet for this video. All right, perfect. So we are getting a timeout of 2,000 milliseconds that were exceeded, which is what I'd expect. So let's increase the timeout for the test. Let's go 30 seconds. So this might take a little longer. Bear with me with the video. Let's run it again. There we go. Failed to connect, could not find prod data. So now we're getting our database connectivity issue. So it is actually running the code. It's running through, let's see where it is. So this is all tedious stuff. So it's not showing us the line of code in our code where it's happening. And I think it's because it's part of a set timeout. So that's in a separate process. We're not able to see what's happening there. But it is actually trying to connect to our database as a part of our regular code. It's not able to do so because it can't find the database. So that's exactly what I'd expect. At this point, you're ready to move on to the next video about basically figuring out how to test and mock out local databases for your testing.